Hi everyone. In the last video, Outback Double Murders, we travelled to Quorn, 2 hours north of my hometown in South Australia. This time we're going almost 2 hours south to the small town of Kapunda, population around 3,000, to cover the horrific triple murder of Andrew, Rose and Chantelle Rowe. A little on the murderer first. In 2004, Jason Alexander Downey moved with his mother, brother and his stepfather, who is Australian, from Scotland to the sleepy small town of Kapunda in rural South Australia. It was a cultural shock for the young boy, who was awkward and withdrawn. By 2010, Jason had only made a small number of friends, notably Dylan Pratt and Chantelle Rowe. At 18, Jason began to develop romantic feelings for 16-year-old Chantelle, and he imagined that they were reciprocated. But it's been reported that Chantelle was not interested in Jason that way, and was growing tired of his advances and constant text messaging. It all came to a head when Chantelle began dating Jason's friend Dylan Pratt. On November 7th, Chantelle threw a party at her parents' home, to which Jason was not invited. Here is what happened after that.
On Saturday, November 8th, 2010, Chantelle Rowe's parents, Rosemary and Andrew, had gone to Adelaide for a night out. Chantelle's party went well.
Rosemary and Andrew arrived home on the Sunday morning, and some of Chantelle's friends were still there. They socialised. And the last known photos of Chantelle and her father and mother were taken on that Sunday during lunch.
It was a typical Rowe family moment, like so many others that they had shared in this pleasant small town with its low crime rate, and where violence was something that happened in other places, not family-friendly Kapunda. By nightfall, across town, Jason Downey was not at home. His mother assumed that he was cruising in his car.
Apparently the car was Jason's entire life. He lived in that when Mum kicked him out of the house multiple times. He went everywhere and did everything for that.
In fact, shortly after midnight, Jason had set off for number 5 Harriet Street. Kapunda would never be the same after that evening.
From accounts from a neighbour, at about 1:03 a.m. on Monday the 8th of November, he heard some screaming of Rosemary from the house and also heard Andrew yelling. As best we can determine, that is when the attack on them was taking place.
Downey had broken in through a window. Detectives can only speculate as to the sequence of events which happened next. Disorientated, having been woken from a deep sleep, confused by what they were encountering, they were easy prey to a frantic attacker.
That all three of them were viciously and savagely attacked with a knife. They all suffered extensive knife wounds. Andrew was stabbed 29 times, Chantelle 33 times, and Rosemary at least 50 times. The attack took place all throughout the house. From later analysis and DNA analysis of the huge amount of blood splatters that were throughout the house, we can determine that that attack took place basically from the front door of the house all through and to the back of the house and the back living room. There was blood splatters over every wall, every floor, in every room, and in effect you had 3 people that were attacked so viciously they bled out at the scene.
It's a very vindictive statement. It's a frenzy of perhaps just all his hatreds came together at once, and his sense of uselessness and despair and rage.
Police believe Downey's sole target at first was Chantelle, her killer raping her as she bled to death.
Chantelle, she had wounds all over her body, also to the back of her body, and she had been redressed and attacked again after that. She had at one stage, whilst alive, crawled under her bed to escape the attack and had been dragged out from under the bed, further assaulted. We believe in that process she was undressed, she was sexually assaulted. Downey had intercourse with her and redressed her and placed her on the bed in the position we later found her.
The frenzy of bloody violence initiated by Downey suggested that he would attack one victim and, as they bled, turn to another. They all put up a fight.
All of them struggled extensively whilst they were fighting for their lives inside that house. Rosemary Rowe's body was found near the back door of the house. Andrew was face down in the kitchen, and Chantelle was face up, lying on her bed in her bedroom. Rosemary Rowe had been assaulted and had been, as best we can determine, crawling on her hands and knees at one stage near the back of the house around a lounge chair, and then again attacked after that. There were at least 3 areas in the house that had signs of Downey attempting to clean up the blood splatter and the blood pooling on the floor, and then having attacked the family and assaulted them again after that because there was fresh blood on top of where he had tried to clean up.
I think that the fury that must have been coming off of him at that moment, the absolute roiling passion that led to him having the strength to do that to these people, it's terrifying to think that someone that thin, that weak looking, can be that animalistic.
The entire horrific sequence of events left 3 dead, but Downey's secret obsession with Chantelle was the trigger point.
We believe that Chantelle was certainly the focus of the initial attack, we believe, unfortunately the parents paid the price of being present at that time.
Chantelle's brother Christopher was not at the family home the evening of the killings. He had lost his parents and his sister. Kapunda woke to the news. A triple murder had happened in an out-of-the-way place. It was almost too much to comprehend.
Murder in this country actually is not very common compared to the rest of the world.
And still less common in small-town Australia. Kapunda had a killer on its hands, and he was on the loose. As Downey had carried out his knife attack, he'd cut himself. His hands were covered with plasters when he visited his buddy Dylan Pratt. Downey seemed in shock.
Tuesday he was around here and didn't come near me, didn't really speak to me. Just kept to himself. He was normally quiet, but this was just freaky quiet, very to himself, wouldn't go near anyone or talk much.
Downey dismissed inquiries about the cuts on his hands. He had snagged himself on engines at work. The police quickly concluded that the killer of 3 members of one family was probably local. Nothing had been stolen, this was not a burglary gone wrong. But for several days, as forensics teams combed the house, they had little else to go on. Kapunda was alive with gossip, but as the week went on, nobody was arrested. Working as mayor of the local Kapunda council routinely means opening farm fairs or tackling issues about grass cutting. Not that week. The small town was overwhelmed with rumours.
Later on, when the bone pointing starts and the suspicions get raised and the small talk starts to get around the place.
Nobody in the town knew the killer was, which meant it could be anyone. Kapunda was a community in fear.
Usually Kapunda's a very open town, doors unlocked and all that. As soon as that happened, everyone shut down. It was a totally different town. I didn't really, from the 2 weeks it happened, I didn't really leave the house for the reason I was scared.
The town was obviously greatly affected, all the occupants of Kapunda, and I think it's got a population of about 3,000. And we door-knocked every one of those houses there too.
There was a major change, I guess, in the fabric of the town and how it would normally operate, because these things don't normally happen. And I still think there was quite an air of disbelief that anything had happened with a lot of people. It was just a shell shock. And there was a lot of grieving of people who actually knew the Rowe family.
They were understandably distressed by what had happened in their previously very quiet, peaceful country town. They wanted to see a result as much as we did, obviously.
The students from the high school, they were devastated, of course, young Chantelle being a pupil from Kapunda High. It was a very, very emotional time, I think, for a lot of people.
All of those who had attended Chantelle's party in Harriet Street were interviewed. Someone who was not there was Jason Downey. As detectives took statements, his name came up. South Australia Police had decided they wanted to talk to Jason Downey. Police in South Australia had come across the name of Jason Downey when interviewing all of those present at a party in this house held by Chantelle Rowe on November 8th.
He was unknown to police. He certainly didn't have a history of violence or any dishonesty offences. He was somewhat unremarkable and possibly describe him as a really an insipid individual.
Police took a statement from him in which he confirmed that he had not been invited, nor did he attend Chantelle's party.
Downey said that he knew Chantelle, knew her from school. Interestingly, he offered an alibi where he was that night, that he'd gone to a nearby town to McDonald's to get food, that he hadn't been to the party. He mentioned that on a number of occasions. But nothing startling perhaps to the untrained eye at that time.
Shortly after giving the statement, Downey attended his workplace Christmas dinner. He appeared to behave perfectly normally. Almost before the investigation had got going, detectives thought Facebook had brought them a breakthrough. Someone in the town posted a comment saying that he had done something terrible and adding that he did not know how he could live with himself. Inquiries revealed that the poster lived near to the Rowe family, but they also revealed that the man was using Facebook to tell the world of a domestic dispute. He was no killer. After 3 days of meticulous forensic work, investigators made a fingerprint breakthrough when powder sprayed across a bigger area than intended.
They were targeting a certain area on the inside of the door to Chantel's bedroom, and that drifted down and picked up another fingerprint that hadn't been targeted, or an area that hadn't been targeted.
It was an accidental discovery that would eventually prove vital in the conviction of Jason Downey, but for now it meant little. Downey did not have a police record. The print did not immediately throw up a suspect. Neither did semen found on Chantel's body throw up a DNA link, but both pieces of evidence would prove vital in days to come. 8 days after the murder of Chantel Rowe and her parents Andrew and Rose, Jason Downey could be seen around Kapunda. Like the rest of those living in the town, he appeared upset.
He continued to come to work during the week and again feign distress over what had happened to a friend of his. Never any signs of him confessing to it. Even went and visited Chantel's boyfriend and discussed the issue with him, and none of them ever suspected him.
Detectives working the town had decided to request DNA samples and fingerprints from everybody who had attended Chantel Rowe's party. They also asked Jason Downey. When he attended the police station, detectives noticed cuts on his hands. After voluntarily giving both prints and a DNA sample, Downey coolly went back to work, and police set about making the checks that they hoped would catch a killer. On November 16, 2010, Jason Downey's fingerprint was confirmed as that found on Chantel Rowe's door. Fearful that he might claim to have been innocently in her house at some point, so eliminating the impact of the fingerprint evidence, detectives wanted more.
There was also semen found at the scene, and that was to produce a full male profile, initially of an unknown person, but then later Downey was identified as being the contributor.
Police now felt confident that they knew the identity of the Kapunda family killer. It was the outsider, Jason Downey.
His DNA was found in at least 4 or 5 other locations in that house. It was irrefutable evidence he couldn't get around.
There was one more crucial piece of evidence which investigators turned up.
Downey had walked around the house wearing shoes initially. There was clear shoe prints around the house. And then at some stage he's taken off those shoes and walked around in socks, and they've become blood-soaked. He has at some stage walked out the front door of the house and tried to tiptoe along the front porch, where we found very distinctive footprints and toe prints.
Police asked Downey's mother for help.
His mother confirmed that he only had about 3 pairs, and there was 1 pair missing, and he couldn't account for those. Through inquiry, we were eventually able to identify the make of the shoe, find where they sold them in Adelaide, purchased them, compared the print, the shoe pattern to the crime scene and the size of his foot, etc., and matched them up.
Detectives decided that the safest thing to do was simply to ask him to call by and sign the statement that he had given days earlier. He was dropped off at the police station by his boss and politely met at the station entrance. As word spread, Kapunda reacted in disbelief that this man could have exhibited the strength and ferocity to slaughter 3 people.
All the reports I had, to be perfectly honest, was disbelief that he would have the capacity to do that. I think one of the comments were that if you lined up 10 people, he would be the last one you'd pick, simply because of his size and all the other matters that sort of surrounded what took place. So it was a bit of a shock for a lot of people, and probably a little bit of disbelief initially that he could possibly have done it.
It certainly didn't look like someone that was capable of overpowering 1 person, let alone 3, and especially not a man the size of Andrew Rowe.
The reaction of disbelief was strongest amongst his few friends.
Shock. I just walked out the back and didn't know what to do. Just sat there, very lost. That someone I knew, Elena, a good mate, could have done that. Even when the cops were interviewing me, they asked me questions, and I don't think it could have been him. He couldn't know anything.
The reaction was absolute disbelief that this tiny, scrawny little man was responsible for these 3 killings, and the community's reaction was exactly the same. People were outright questioning, did he attack Andrew when Andrew was asleep? Were Andrew and Rose passed out? Had they had some drinks before they went to bed? Had he somehow managed to knock them unconscious and then kill them? We didn't know the answers to that either.
I didn't think it was him until I thought it could have been him until they arrested him. Mum worked it out and wouldn't tell me, and I had to wait till I seen other news to figure out who it was.
Downey denied everything. He had been seen laying a bouquet of flowers at the murder scene. He had changed his story constantly.
Certainly did. He admitted to my detectives that he did lie a lot, and we know he lied to his mother in a letter to her, he lied to his brother in a phone call to him.
Armed with a wealth of forensic evidence against Downey, police charged him with the murder of Chantal, Rose and Andrew Rowe. But rather than put the rest of the Rowe family and the whole of Kapunda out of their misery by accepting his guilt, Downey continued to insist it was not him. Kapunda was to have to wait for justice. Jason Downey had fashioned himself as a successful, popular guy, but he had a secret passion for Chantal Rowe, which had become an obsession. Now he was on trial for her murder.
Downey's demeanour at the time was very much like a shamed little boy. He kept to himself very furtive-like at the time. And again, he was still such a small, wry character.
He had arrived at court having refused to accept his guilt. It prolonged the mystery and caused deep unease within the town.
The community were quite confident through police statements and various other means that Jason Downey was the only suspect, and the police were quite convinced of that. So we, I think as a community, wanted to see that court case finalised and be able to move on. But when that happened, it dragged that whole process out and creates further suspicion that, oh, maybe this person isn't the person.
But when the charges were read to him and faced with the evidence against him, he changed his mind.
When it did happen, it was quite strange because Downey was asked first about murdering Chantal. How do you plead? He paused, he swallowed audibly before he said guilty. Then when he was asked to plead to the charges involving Andrew and Rose, he said guilty as quickly as he could, getting it out of the way.
With relatives of both sides of the family and a crowded press bench in the courtroom, Downey seemed to enjoy the notoriety as he listened to the prosecutor.
Downey's reactions were chilling. He sat there, showed no reaction at all when he spoke of breaking the knife off in their bodies, of Rose crawling for her life down the side of their kitchen table as Downey continued to stab her. Downey didn't react to it at all.
No remorse whatsoever, never evident, even when he was sitting in court listening to the victim impact statements being read out to him, and there was quite a number of them. No signs of remorse, sorrow, regret, anything. Downey sat back in the dock and licked his lips. And it was a reaction that instantly caught the attention of everyone in the courtroom. Chantal's brother Christopher looked physically ill. Everyone in the room just tensed because that was the worst possible thing he could have done, because it really proved what the police were saying, that his confession was nothing more than an admission he'd done it. There was no contrition. There was no remorse. He was looking forward to hearing what happened next.
Before sentencing, and probably in a bid to lessen his minimum term for committing the murders, Downey eventually wrote a letter to the surviving Rowe family members. It did not go down well. To all of the friends and the family of Chantal, Andrew and Rosemary Rowe, he wrote, "First of all, I would like to apologise for my recent actions. From the bottom of my heart, I'm deeply sorry for my actions."
Jason had written a letter of apology, and that the Rowe family weren't interested in reading it. I look at this letter now, and it still staggers me to see the childishness of the handwriting. It's a mixture of capitalised letters and small lowercase letters. One can't apologise for killing 3 people like that. So this is staggering in its inadequacy. It completely and utterly misses the point.
"I had a career, car, friends, and most importantly, I had my family. Now, due to my recent actions, I have nothing."
And then it goes on to say how upset he is that he's given away the fact that he had a career, car, friends and family. And the rest is feeling sorry for himself. He refers to the murder as my recent actions. There's no empathy there. There's no understanding. This is a person, this is a boy that's been caught doing something that no right-minded adult would possibly do. And he doesn't even understand that. I don't think he ever will.
Detectives were positively furious that Downey had tried to appear remorseful. They knew better.
That moved the head of major crime to come out and make a very rare public statement to the media, warning that just because Downey had pleaded guilty didn't mean that he was contrite, didn't mean that he was remorseful, and didn't mean anything of actual substance. It was simply an admission and nothing more.
Heartless, cold killer. What he did to that family, and particularly what he did to Chantal, was just atrocious how one human being can do that to another is beyond me, and then live with it afterwards. I spent the day with him. It was just another day for him. It was just, he just showed no emotion, even when we dragged out and found his blood-stained clothing hidden. It was nothing to him.
Jason Downey received a 35-year non-parole sentence, but no amount of time can bring back the loving mother, father and sister of Christopher Rowe. Another senseless murder that robbed the lives of an entire family. Please help by liking this video and subscribe to see more crime and cold case videos coming up. Thanks for watching.